Fire for them, fire for them. If you're looking for that 35 bag umbrella and all damn thing there, keep it locked with DISUNOMICS podcast.
Yo, what's going on, people? You're now locked into another episode of DISUNOMICS podcast. I believe this is episode 322. You could probably tell the sound quality is back to where it needs to be. I'm in the studio with actual camera, so hopefully you get this depending on how good and how competent I am with the edits. Apologies for the sound quality. Well, it was still good, but not to the same level. Now, as usual, we'll do a shout out to the previous episode and the listeners. The racial hierarchy within the Labour Party, Diane Abbott and the Ford Report. Quick summary of this. Diane Abbott we saw what Frank Hester said where he makes him hate. Bro said she should be shot. And people like her make him... Oh, it's crazy. I genuinely couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. So if you think that's bad, there's almost stuff equally as bad, if not worse, that was said by actual senior Labour Party officials in WhatsApp group messages. Now, these were all released in what's called the Labour leaks, WhatsApp chats, emails, interviews that were on tape, letters, and you can see the clear level of Islamophobia and anti-black racism that was within the Labour Party, but you would never know. You would never know, and that's because there's a clear hierarchy of racism in the Labour Party. Now, Keir Starmer did commission an independent report after these leaks, and that was carried out by tenured barrister Martin Ford. Barrister for good about 38 years, I believe. Now, he commissioned this report, and he basically verified everything I said. So make sure you check that episode out. It's a good one. Now, this week is the second part of this racial hierarchy mini-series, where we're looking again at the Labour leaks with regards to Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party, how anti-Semitism was actually handled, who was at fault, and in my opinion, and I think I can argue this case pretty convincingly, Jeremy Corbyn was last on the list of people at fault. And how, due to separate factions in the Labour Party, and also I believe his media bias, he was completely and utterly smeared with regards to anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. And we're going to get into that shortly after this quick break. What's very interesting from my research here doing this is that Jewish people within the Labour Party are disproportionately investigated for anti-Semitism. Yes, you heard correct. Jewish people in the Labour Party are disproportionately, meaning the proportionality outweighs it of everybody else in the Labour Party in terms of being investigated for anti-Semitism. Now, that should raise alarm bells for anybody with any sort of rationality, right? But this is a snippet into what we're going to discuss today. And it shows a clear fundamental flaw in how the Labour Party conducted investigations and the criteria for what is deemed anti-Semitic, which also leads to my belief that there's a clear racial hierarchy with regards to anti-Semitism, anti-black racism, Islamophobia, and so on and so forth in the Labour Party. So when I was looking at the Labour leaks, let's start off with these two relatively elderly women, Helen Marks and I think Rika Bird. Was it Nika Bird? 2016, 2017 times. Yeah, they were involved in the Labour Party. Grandparents killed in the Holocaust. They were accused of anti-Semitism. So there was a hit piece, in my opinion, from BBC Panorama, which was about Jeremy Corbyn anti-Semitism. This was done not too long before the election, right? Where they interviewed some young budding Labour Party Jews who spoke of their fear of Jeremy Corbyn. And some of the things that they detailed were wildly inaccurate and misleading. So we're going to start off with a gentleman by the name of, I think his name is Ben Westerman. So he was tasked with interviewing one of these two ladies went to interview. I think one, I can't remember who was being interviewed at the time, but the other one was there to be the witness or company, or I can't remember the correct terminology. So they've been interviewed for the claims of anti-Semitism, right? So Ben Westerman, at the end of the interview, I believe it was Miss Bird asks Ben Westerman, the interviewer, what part of what faction are you from, or what part of the party are you from? He said he didn't believe that was relevant. Now, what he said in the Panorama documentary was at the end of the interview, she asked him, where are you from? He didn't answer. She asked him again. He said he doesn't think that information is required or relevant. She then allegedly, according to him, said, you're from Israel. Now, he took this and he articulated on the BBC Panorama documentary that this is a clear anti-Semitic trope, that she is indicating that he must have some ties and being in cahoots with the Israeli government. But luckily, she had a tape, she had a recording, and you can hear clearly she was asking what faction of the Labour Party bro was from. She never once said the word Israel. That is a snippet of what was going on behind the scenes in the Labour Party. I was looking at the analysis of a gentleman, Andrew Finstein, who investigated the Labour leak files. And he was showing examples from the Labour leak files, and it is wild, right? There was social media, they investigate social media posts. So here's an example. A social media post was, I think this was on Facebook, where somebody said, the enemy isn't Christianity, it isn't Judaism, it isn't Islam, as long as it is basically Zionism. And it's the Zionists, the Rothschilds. And they also said that the Rothschilds hold 80% of the world's wealth. Now, you can argue like these are anti-Semitic tropes where you are claiming that this Jewish family is like controlling the world and so on and so forth. You can see the argument regarding that one. However, there's another social media post implying that Jewish people control the media. And another post that said JFK was also killed and Lincoln was also killed, and the people who attacked the USS Liberty are attacking our liberty are the Jews. Quite asinine, ridiculous, and clearly anti-Semitic statements. But in the discipline files, there was also examples of things that I don't think anybody in their right and rational mind, as long as they are acting in good faith, can say are examples that should be investigated for anti-Semitism. So, for example, I'm not sure if many of our listeners, I think some of the ones who listen to me quite a while, know about 4 Palestinian boys playing on the beach. And there's actual footage of this as it happens. Playing football on the beach. These boys were attacked from the Air Force, I believe. I'm not sure if it was an attack helicopter or a jet. Can't remember off the top of my head. And killed. Now, there was like a graphic with the 4 boys and of football commiserating their deaths, saying that this should never happen. That post was highlighted to be investigated for anti-Semitism. Mourning the death of 4 innocent Palestinian boys playing football on the beach should not be investigated for anti-Semitism. Otherwise, what are you trying to imply? This is anti-Semitic to commiserate the death of 4 innocent boys? Another post asks for the International Criminal Court of Justice and other bodies to investigate and charge Benjamin Netanyahu for war crimes of what he was doing in Gaza at the time. So this is not even this recent gist. This is, because obviously these men have been doing this for time, because when I say these men, I mean the Israeli government and the IDF. That was investigated for anti-Semitism, asking for somebody who's committed war crimes to be investigated for war crimes. Okay. Another post was a child crying, asking for Israel to be put on trial for war crimes. The child wasn't asking, it was just a picture of a child obviously bloodied with smoke, probably being a victim of another Israeli assault. And then the annotations around the picture was Israel should be investigated for war crimes, because deliberately targeting civilians is a war crime. This was the fundamental flaw with investigations and the way justice was served within the Labour Party. It is very clear from the Labour leaks. I think it's clear from reading the news, watching the news, seeing people from like the Jewish Chronicle all the time, Sky News, BBC, from the way they speak and articulate their arguments, from our MPs from both sides of the House. It's very clear that any form of critique on the actions of the Israeli government is deemed as anti-Semitic. What I do find very mad is because the same people will often say Israel is a democracy, it is a good democracy, everybody within Israel are treated equally. There's Arab Israelis, there's Christian Israelis, Israelis from all different backgrounds, they're all equal. So how could criticizing Israel automatically lead to anti-Semitism when you've told us that Israelis are also Jewish, are also Arab Muslims, are also Christians? That doesn't make sense. Why can't we criticize the action? Why should Israel be the only country on planet Earth that are above critique and reproach? As far as I'm aware, they are subject to international law just as everybody else. A 2017 investigation by Al Jazeera led to party members being investigated because they shared the links. So Al Jazeera investigating some of the happenings in Gaza and the West Bank, so on and so forth, because people sharing a news publication's investigation, the people sharing this were investigated for anti-Semitism. That's like me being a part of the Liberal Democrat Party and I'm sharing an investigation from NBC into what's happening in a particular country and I'm investigated for racism in that country. That don't make no goddamn sense. I just even remembered what that, and the reason for that is because the investigation itself was with regards to the links between pro-Israeli lobbies within the Labour Party and Israel. Now, what's interesting is that there's Friends of Israel and Jews for Labour, right? Two different factions. And I believe it might be, is it Friends for Israel? Did I jot it down in my notes? It was Friends for Israel. So somebody quite high up in Friends for Israel was secretly recorded boastfully speaking of how they have direct connections and they're working with the Israeli embassy in London. And they're speaking about how they're working to further a pro-Israeli viewpoint in the country and for people to be in support of what's happening within Gaza and the West Bank.
Establishes ties between the Israeli embassy in London and organisations within the Labour Party. An officer for the parliamentary group Labour Friends of Israel is covertly filmed.
We work pretty closely together. But like, a lot of it's behind the scenes. Keeping it as a separate thing is actually better for everyone because ultimately we've got the same end goal of getting more people to be pro-Israel and to understand the conflict. So it's just how you do it.
This is not conjecture. This is not slander. This is not anti-Semitism. Bro said it himself. He's on tape. So if that's not true, you got to take it up a bro. But that's what man said. Do you get it? Now, to investigate people for sharing these links is totally incredible. If anything, you should be investigating Jews, Labour Friends of Israel, saying, is it appropriate that you have ties and you're working with the Israeli embassy? Is that appropriate? Whether it is or not, that's for you to decide. Also, many of the people who believed that Israel was behaving like an apartheid state, and remember apartheid was a system in South Africa where the white South Africans had superiority to the black South Africans in terms of rights, politics, so on and so forth, right? People who believe this about Israel have also been investigated under the guise of anti-Semitism. Now, Amnesty International, United Nations, especially UN Special Rapporteur, a variety of bodies, a variety of established people in the world of human rights and just politics in general who have articulate. Even the former Attorney General of Israel has said with his sadness that Israel has become an apartheid state. So I don't think this is an incredibly controversial take. And even if it is, if you believe it is, because I think it's very clear it isn't, but even if you believe it is, it's just not something without merit that isn't worth discussion. Now, to put this under the guise of it should be investigated for anti-Semitism is total lunacy. So this gives you an indication of what was going on within the Labour Party. Now let's fast forward. Now let's backtrack and go to 2015, and this is when Mr Corbyn was rising up the Labour Party and entering as leader of the Labour Party. Now remember, Jeremy Corbyn's CV is impeccable. People know me on social media. I've been a big criticizer of both parties, but I criticize the Labour Party because I know my audience, majority black. I also have ethnic minorities, Asian, whether they be Southern Asians, people from the Far East, Eastern Europeans, all different type of people. They tend to be relatively young, under the age of 40. A lot reside in London. Quite a few are university educated. Quite a few are left-leaning. All these different subgroups tend to vote for Labour en masse. 88% of Caribbeans, 80% of Africans. I think over 60% of Londoners. People university educated tend to vote for Labour, especially the younger ones, right? So naturally, my whole thing was I never want people to be giving our votes for Labour like it's on direct debit. They don't deserve it. They have to earn it. And Jeremy Corbyn is a great man, but he's not indicative of the Labour Party. And that was always my argument. And obviously by the last 2 pods, I was proven unequivocally, emphatically, 110% spot on accurate. But I've always maintained, despite I completely disagree with Jeremy Corbyn's economic policy, because I do not believe in socialism, I think it's nonsensical. I agree with him on a lot of his foreign policy outside of not having nuclear weapons. I think you kind of have to, because you got to keep the big 4-4s. You get me? Like certain things happen to certain countries, like Gaza, like Ukraine, because they don't have certain facilities. There's the reason why man can't try Iran the same way they try other countries. Man can't try North Korea the same way they try other countries, for obvious reasons. They got the big 4-4. Do you get it? So, but in terms of like foreign policy, I agree with him wholeheartedly. But anyway, that's digressing. He's a great man. He has a history of fighting for equality of all people, from Palestine, from going against apartheid in South Africa, always wanting the workers' rights and the betterment of working class people, as well as everybody in the United Kingdom. He is certified. Now, when he came in 2015, he was also speaking out against the crimes for Israel. Labour didn't want people to be speaking about their bad experiences or anything bad to do with Israel with any sort of velocity or vim, as you can tell by the way they treat the investigations. What's interesting is that he was so desperate at times to not even allow any sort of anti-Semitism claims besmirch his name. Listen to this example. A press conference, black activist Mark Wandsworth said that he saw an MP of Labour saying that you can see, and said he could see her working hand in hand with somebody from, I think it was a Telegraph, right? And this is because when Corbyn was announcing some like anti-racism type plans, there was an article basically like was cussing it, smearing it, and he said that he saw Shorty being handed an article from the editor or somebody at the, do you know what I'm saying, at the publication. Now, she took it as this is an anti-Semitic trope because as a Jewish person, you are saying I'm in cahoots with undermining, bum, 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 bum. Like, and obviously that article criticizes like people looking to anti-Semitism claim, bum, 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 right? And obviously, Mark Wandsworth claims that he had no idea. How was he meant to know he's Jewish? He had no idea, right? He was effectively suspended from the Labour Party, and Corbyn actually threw him under the bus. And this person was actually a long-time friend of Jeremy Corbyn, just because he didn't want no schmud in his name. Do you get it? Now, there was a big outrage was caused, obviously, what's the name of the Labour MP? I'll get her name, it'll come to me. She accused him of anti-Semitism, and she wrote in a statement how he's anti-Semitic, boom, boom, boom. He thought this was libelous. He was like, bro, how was I meant to know that you're Jewish? And I don't think it is relevant. So he wrote a letter, his lawyer wrote a letter to her saying this is libelous, and if you don't retract your statement, we're going to take action. What did Shorty do? Retract her statement. But naturally, the retraction of the statement didn't get the same coverage or any coverage compared to the statement itself. this type of stuff led to headlines that is not a safe space to be with regards to Labour Party as a Jew under the guidance of Jeremy Corbyn. What's interesting is that he had a lot of Jewish support in the Labour Party. For example, there's Jewish Voice for Labour. This group of people had tremendous support for Mr Corbyn. And these people, ironically, were also critical of Israel and Zionism, unlike Jewish Friends for Israel and Labour for Israel. So you've got these three factions that with regards to Jews and Labour Party. You've got two, Jews for Israel and Labour Friends of Israel on one side, who are like quite pro-Zionism and don't believe in critique of Israel. And then you've got a Jewish Voice for Labour who obviously pro-Jews, but at the same time they will criticise the actions of bad behaviour from the Israeli government. What's interesting is when you actually start to, and seeing this from the Labour leaks, when you start to investigate some of these people. Oh, there's a gentleman by the name of Mr Hoffman and another lady, which her name, I'm going to try to pull it in the video, forgets me, where you saw them at EDL marches. Now remember, Labour Party is on the left of the political spectrum. They're meant to be the party of the people, the party of the voiceless, the party of everybody, no matter what ethnic minority you are. But you are at the same marches, pally with the EDL, who, as many know, are a far-right, bigotry, racist, anti-migrant, anti-Muslim, anti-black, anti-everything that isn't white British. In fact, the lady he was standing next to headed up the Jewish division of the EDL. And there was a blog that these men were writing on where, I need to get this woman's name because I'm not going to do it justice, where she was writing such disgusting remarks about Muslims and Arabs, saying that they eat camel crap and their religion is disgusting, and spoke about how it was just crazy. Anyway, we saw EDL at pro-Israeli demonstrations organised by these people. Oh, it has a name. There's another one, Sharon Clough, who regularly supported the EDL, and she had called Islam the greater enemy. She held meetings which was recorded, and this was just before Sadiq Khan was mayor of London, where they were speaking of how they are worrisome that a Muslim will become mayor of London, and how it's not in our best interest to have a Muslim as mayor of London. Why? You know why. Now let's get into the anti-Semitism and Jeremy Corbyn part. Now, the way the Labour Party was set up before Jeremy Corbyn was that there was two main functions. You had the Lotto, which was like the leader of opposition. This is where Jeremy Corbyn sits in Westminster. This is where he heads up. This is where he's in control of. And then you have the Labour Party HQ. And at the time, a gentleman by the name of Ian McNicol was head of, right? Now, when there is issues and disputes within the Labour Party, that falls under the remit of the Labour Party headquarters, and that's where Ian McNicol, he's in charge of everything that falls under that remit. So him and his team are the ones that lead the investigations and the disciplinary process that goes up to the NEZ. Not Mr Corbyn. That is the bureaucracy of the Labour Party that predated Jeremy Corbyn, right? So Ian McNicol was in charge of handling the anti-Semitism complaints. McNicol, ironically, and unsurprisingly to you, you could probably guess, was very hostile to Jeremy Corbyn. Now let's look at some group chat gist, between some senior officials in the Labour Party. We got Claire Francis Muller, Tracy Allen, who's a repeat offender, stupid cow, and Mike Creighton. Claire Francis Fuller says, "I'm just about to stab him." This is in relation to Jeremy Corbyn. Tracy Allen said, "That might be disciplinary." Claire Francis Fuller says, "Worth it though." Mike Creighton says, "Nothing in the rules about stabbing. Poor form though." Tracy Allen says, "Ian's got some great knives, but an ice pick will have a certain irony." Now, they are talking, mockingly joking about stabbing Mr Corbyn. Under the guise of what? What did he do? Now, the Iceweek reference, which I mentioned on my previous podcast, is reference to the dictator and mass murderer, former leader of the USSR, Joseph Stalin, and when he killed one of his rivals with an ice pick. Imagine people laughing and joking about doing this to a high-ranking, or let's say there was the leader of the Labour Party was Jewish. Imagine them talking in this regards. Anyway, people in the party attempted to launch a coup to get rid of Jeremy Corbyn. However, although he wasn't the most popular man in his party, amongst members, ridiculously popular. Like, he was able to mobilize tens of thousands of people to join the Labour Party when he started running and after. And you start to see a higher level of engagement within the Labour Party from ethnic minorities, right? And what's very, very interesting is that the Labour Party started a validation process all of a sudden. And this is a validation process to vet particular members to see if they should be able to join the Labour Party. And this was by vetting their social media activity. This is how the validation process works. They drew a list of Labour MPs and searched whoever is trying to apply to be a member of the Labour Party and search their social media accounts and those people's names to see if there's any like offensive attacks against these people. But there was only searches over, I think it was 53 members. Not all MPs. And somehow, by some coincidence, that these are all MPs who were not on the side of Jeremy Corbyn and who were critical of Jeremy Corbyn, opponents of Jeremy Corbyn. So if you said anything critical about Jeremy Corbyn or any other MPs that were in his camp or in favour of Jeremy Corbyn, you could pass the validation process. But not on the contrary. Is that not bias? What's interesting is that more than 11,000 people identified for this investigation. 11,000 people. So 11,000 people have been identified. What needs to happen? You need to investigate them, right? By default, this has now diverted the time that the people who run these investigations from investigating claims of anti-Semitism, racism, sexism, homophobia, so on and so forth. So the people, and this is under the Labour HQ, which is headed up by Ian McNicol, instead of purely focusing on these claims of anti-Semitism and so on and so forth, they have also had to spend some of their time with these investigations of applying members to the Labour Party based off this validation process that they created to kind of stop Jeremy Corbyn winning. This was run by a gentleman by the name of Sam Matthews, who was head of disputes from 2016 to 2018. Jeremy Corbyn writes to Ian McNicol, February 2018. Remember, February 2018. Writes to Ian McNicol, angrily saying the disputes team, which is headed up by Mr. Matthews, is so ineffective in tackling anti-Semitism. He says the process is too slow to meet the volume. This is Jeremy Corbyn. This wasn't press release to the world. This was an email, internal email from himself. Remember, he's sitting in the lotto. He's sitting as a leader of the opposition in Westminster. He is writing to Ian McNicol, the head of the Labour Party headquarters, who oversees a lot of the bureaucracy and what goes on in terms of the investigations. He's saying, bro, your boy, Sam, who's in charge of these disputes and investigations, is moving too damn slow. We have issues with anti-Semitism. The process needs to be quicker so we can get to the bottom of it. But this is the same person that they are saying was deliberately trying to stop people investigating anti-Semitism. And under his leadership, anti-Semitism was a big issue in the Labour Party. And he's anti-Semitic, so on and so forth. You can't be safe and Jewish because of Jeremy Corbyn as head of the Labour Party. McNichol's response to that, claiming anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, listen, this is the head of everything to do with complaints because he's the head of the Labour Party HQ. I'm going to tie it in with something later, which is going to remember, this is what he said now in 2018. He said that the claims of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party were overstated. with more than half of these instances coming from non-members, which means they should not be looked at by the disputes team. He said it, not me. So he said, listen, bro, it's all right, cuz, like, these men are gassing it. Is it no exaggeration? That was his words. What is so ironic is that Ian McNicol scolds Corbyn, saying that he should remind the people that the shadow cabinet that misguided, because obviously he's like criticising his team and how they're handling these complaints. He even scolded Corbyn, said, bro, you should like, you and your other members of the shadow cabinet, so that's Jeremy Corbyn's team, and all these people would be part of the official cabinet if they won election, should not be saying these things in public because you undermine the Labour Party. So you should not be criticising the way we tackle anti-Semitism and the complaints of it because it is undermining the Labour Party as a whole. So here's Ian McNicol putting the perception of the Labour Party and his own team and his own feelings above getting to the bottom of anti-Semitism claims in a timely manner. Eventually, Corbyn, because he's a smart man, he replaces Ian McNicol with Jenny Formby. So Jenny Formby is now the head of the Labour Party headquarters. So now Corbyn has got one of his people heading up the Labour Party. So he's changed the bureaucracy. So effectively, he is now effectively in charge of how things are run, right? So her and her staff, they come in and they are appalled with what's going on, fam. They are saying, we are seeing claims from 2016 unhandled in 2019, cuz. So somebody's making a claim of anti-Semitism in 2016 and nothing's been done 3 years later. That's almost a whole Olympic cycle. Do you get it? Also, they said there was no real record keeping with regards to why members were suspended for anti-Semitism. There was no real documentation. So it's hard to find out how they came to that conclusion. This was all going on under Ian McNicol, not under Jeremy Corbyn. And as I said, it was evident to the team that stuff that was happening in 2016 hadn't been worked on up until 2019 when they came through. What was amazing was that Al Jazeera had this amazing chart which showed, I think it showed suspensions, investigations, and I think maybe expulsions, right? With regards to anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. And before Corbyn put in Jenny Formby, all of the above, so investigations, suspensions, expulsions were all very low. The moment Jenny Formby came in, we saw an exponential rise in all three. We saw that way more investigations were happening and being concluded, which led to way more suspensions, which led to obviously more disciplinary action. So under Ian McNicol, there were 44 allegations of anti-Semitism. Under Jenny Formby, 44 cases that were of anti-Semitism that were investigated. Under Jenny Formby, there were 379. She almost 10x, man. So what did that show? Once Corbyn's people got involved, they were able to look into almost 10 times the cases. But this is the person that people are saying is anti-Semitic and was the reason why anti-Semitism was on the rise in the Labour Party, and people don't feel safe being there. As I said before, Jewish people are disproportionately reprimanded for anti-Semitism because they have muddied the waters. So the EHRC, which is the Equality and Human Rights Commission, investigated like claims of anti-Semitism and how the Labour leadership handled them. But what's very, very disgusting is the way that they handled this case. They looked at Jeremy Corbyn and 13 of his closest associates. But why did it make sense is because if you wanted a full picture of how the Labour Party were handling anti-Semitism claims, you wouldn't just look at Jeremy Corbyn and 13 of his closest associates. You also look at Ian McNicol and members of his staff, because they were in charge of the process from like 2015 to like 2018. We actually, and with the Labour leaks, you can actually read the documentations. Remember, I gave you a snippet from Jeremy Corbyn's e-bar where they are actively trying to speed up the process so these cases can be heard Whereas under Ian McNichol, they weren't being heard. So there's a case of, I think, Ken Livingstone, who was the former mayor of London, right? And obviously, I think he might have been boys with Mr Corbyn. And with the EHRC, they said that, and this is what people hang the hat on, that Jeremy Corbyn treated cases differently, therefore, like saying, implying that he interfered with these cases. And the Ken Livingstone case was one that was cited. The reason why there was intervention was not due to the contents of the case. There's no evidence, and there wasn't, because it didn't happen, of him trying to get involved in the case and sabotage it. The intervention was to expedite the case because cases weren't being heard. But they were trying to make it seem like bro was trying to help his boy beat the case. Halima Khan, a lady by the name of Halima Khan, was part of Jenny Formby's team, of investigating cases with the Labour Party. And she spoke of how it got to the point in the Labour Party where, because of the push regarding anti-Semitism from obviously factions within the Labour Party, and it became a big public story, it got to the point that if you're about to leave work, let's say you're about to leave work at 5 or 6, and then there was a case presented regarding anti-Semitism, the directors will tell you to stay and make sure you pattern it. So if the Jewish Chronicle sent something, you had to make sure that you were staying behind. And she said often they will even suspend the person involved without even asking them any questions and investigating, just so they can go back to the Jewish Chronicle to let them know that they've handled it. That is not how you should be handling cases. But they're under so much pressure to do so that this is what they were doing, because they didn't want to give off the impression that they were anti-Semitic. And again, this also shows a hierarchy of racism with the Labour Party, because I've seen a case where a man was being blatantly, what's I'm looking for, Islamophobic, and they sat in it for 2 years because he was a journalist and they knew they could get away with it. The point where people working within this division that looks into investigation cases were just reacting to cases. So like, let's say you're a part of a disciplinary committee, you have to wait until people submit disputes for you to look into. They actually got to a point where they, under so much pressure from anti-Semitism campaigners, factions with the Labour Party, the media, so on and so forth, they started scouring the internet looking to find any evidence. And you're telling me that there's not a hierarchy of racism within the Labour Party? In the Jeremy Corbyn era, 23% of cases involved one single individual complainant. One individual was responsible for 23% of the claims. 12% came from Labour against anti-Semitism. Labour against anti-Semitism is a group that regularly makes claims of anti-Semitism against fellow Jewish members. And what's so interesting, and this is almost like a deeper, darker criminal link to this point, that the spokesperson by the name of Ewan Phillips for Labour against anti-Semitism is not even Jewish. Bro isn't Jewish. But shall I tell you why this is relevant? Because in his correspondence, and this is in the Labour leaks, this is not conjecture, this is not rumours, cuz this is not allegations. This is facts, because we got the emails, yeah? Bro would send emails under the name of David Goldstein, which is a name that you would associate with somebody who's Jewish. Do you know, like, naturally, like, if you see the name Ladipo, or Femisola, or Tayo, or Ayo, or Funke, you will naturally think Nigerian, because it's like a common name. So when you see Goldstein, the chances are this person might be Jewish. Chances are. Or married to somebody who's Jewish. So this, to the point where in one email he actually messed up because he signed off as Ewan. Then he replied to it, sorry, I meant to say thank you, David. Now let's speak about Jonathan Hoffman, who was the one I remember, who I mentioned before, that was chilling with that EDL. side by side a woman who is the head of the division of the EDL, who was seen in the blog saying that Arabs eat shit and that. He was also taking interviews with mainstream media speaking on the guise of Labour against anti-Semitism. So this is the media platforming somebody who has strong ties to the EDL. Sky News, Good Morning Britain, they don't platform people from the EDL because it's absurd. But this is what they're doing, and this is all to besmirch Mr Corbyn. Imagine people in the Labour Party who are doggies with right wing, not just right wing, because Conservatives are right wing. You get people like Suella Braverman and Kenny Badenoch who are like pretty right wing compared to the likes of Rishi Sunak, who's not that far right wing. Then you've got the far right. That's the EDL. So how could people from the far right generally people on the left? Don't make no rascal sense. Let's go to 2019. The right to return protests from the Palestinians. What was this? People in Gaza, because there's now been a big wall built around Gaza, they're besieged. And obviously in 1948, quick history lesson, very truncated, there was a war, and after the war, because obviously the Palestinians disagreed with Israel being able to come, Zionists being able to create an Israeli Jewish state, which would have been called Israel, in their land. So naturally there was a war. And after the war, there was an Nakba where hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were forced from their homes, thousands were killed, villages were burned, so on and so forth. So they're arguing for the right to return to their homeland and to where they used to live, right? And it's a peaceful protest, which had some violent flare-ups when people were like throwing rocks and stuff like that. But for the overall majority, peaceful protest. Israelis were shooting everybody. So many people died. They shot journalists, they shot women, they shot children, they even shot someone who's disabled. Somebody was sitting in a wheelchair 300 meters away from the wall. 300 meters is like 3 football pitches. They still shot and killed this person. Right? Over 100 people were killed. This was never spoken about in the Labour Party because people were too scared to speak up for the Palestinians because they believed they will be flagged for anti-Semitism. Labour members also pushed for a new definition of anti-Semitism. I'm going to read it out to you. This is what anti-Semitism is now. Let me bring this closer to me. Calling for, aiding or justifying the killing or harming of Jews in the name of radical ideology or extremist views of their religion. Spot on. Making mendacious, dehumanizing, demonizing, or stereotypical allegations about Jews, such as the power of Jews as a collective, such as especially but not exclusively to the myth about a Jewish world conspiracy, so on and so forth. Spot on. Accusing Jews of a people for being responsible for real or imagined wrongdoing committed by a single Jewish person or group, or even for acts of non-Jews. I agree with that one. Denying the fact or scope or mechanism of gas chambers, for example, or the intentionality of the genocide of the Jewish people at the hands of the Nazis, as anti-Semitism, completely fine. But this one is where there's an issue. Denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination, e.g. by claiming the existence of the state of Israel, is a racist endeavor. Now, the reason why that is an issue is because the reason why there's a state of Israel is because they jettisoned the Palestinians. So with this, the mere claiming of the Palestinians' right to self-determination and the Palestinians' right to have a state will be in direct conflict to this. Therefore, anti-Semitic. Basically, you can't criticize Israel. And the IHRA definition got adopted by the NEC, and the NEC are the people that pass judgment on Labour investigations into any dispute. So therefore, Palestinian voices weren't heard out of fear, because if they criticize Israel or were pro-Palestinian getting their statehood and their rights, there's chances that they'll be investigated, and when it comes to NEC, they'll get pumped. If that is not a clear and concise example of racial, of racism, of a hierarchy of racism, sorry, then nothing is. It's so interesting because that position is very different from many people, such as Amnesty International, who believe that Israel is an apartheid state. Corbyn also believes that. And what's interesting is that Keir's position is not that. I remember when he came in, he had an interview with one of the people I despise so much. What's his prick's name? He's at the editor of the Jewish Chronicle, some bold guy. Oh, he's so irritating. Flipping fraud. And he basically spoke of how he does not hold the position of Jeremy Corbyn with regards to the bit like Israel being an apartheid state and so on and so forth. 56 Jewish people had been investigated / suspended or expelled from the Labour Party after this Keir Starmer's entry and this new guidance. Jewish people are 6.3 times more likely to be investigated for anti-Semitism than non-Jews in the Labour Party. I'm going to repeat that again. Jewish people are 6.3 times more likely to be investigated for anti-Semitism than non-Jewish people within the Labour Party. Make it make sense. So you can see very clearly that Jeremy Corbyn did pretty much all that was humanly possible to address anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. He changed the bureaucracy, and Ian McNicol, Sam Matthews and co got away with their part in rising anti-Semitism within the Labour Party and people not being held into account and there not to be justice. It was Corbyn who was actually trying to speed up the process, and we saw more suspensions, more investigations, more expulsions under Jeremy Corbyn's leadership. But Jews for Israel and co did their absolute best to make it seem that Jeremy Corbyn was issue. Now, do we believe they knew or didn't know Jeremy Corbyn was doing all he can and was actually doing the right thing? Of course they did. Because they're regularly submitting fellow Jews. But in my opinion, and this is my analysis of the Labour leaks and what was happening, it was that they were acting with the macro view that we can't have the leader of opposition be somebody who is against the current activity of the oppressive apartheid state of Israel. Because they probably don't believe that is an apartheid state, and they believe that it's a threat to Israel. Now, I'm sure these people just want to protect Israel, and there is some merits towards that. But you can be protective of Israel and not support the mass murder, the apartheid, the oppression of another group of people. That's my belief. I think nobody can out-debate me on this. And I'm pretty sure most listeners believe that. But yeah, that's it for this week's pod. Please let me know what you think in the comments. Give me your thoughts. Let me know if you like the video. Let me know if you want anything to change. Of course, this is also going to be on podcast form. And yeah, man, on to next week, or to the next episode, I say. Peace and blessings. Bow.